Welcome to the Good Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Beers, and I have with me my trusty sidekick and brother, Dr. Jeremiah Beers. And today we're going to be talking about something that we get asked all the time, and I think it's something that's on a lot of people's minds, and that is the concept of vaccines. And it's interesting that vaccines have become really a focal point of questioning about, are vaccines good medicines? Do they really help people? What's the risk of taking vaccines? And this, I think, has come about because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the response to the vaccines that were generated during the pandemic. And so today we're going to try to hopefully give you some right down the middle. I'm not trying to be on either side. I want to give you education and real information about what we know, what the real data tell us about vaccines, and what we don't know. And with anything in medicine, there's a lot of stuff we don't know. And so we do the best with the information that we have. And as a scientist, I try to be very objective and look at real data to make decisions. And I know it's confusing because it's become such a polarized issue right now. Everyone, you kind of have to take a side. I'm anti-vax. And both of those sides to the extreme are crazy, right? Both of them are. And, in my mind, it's like, I'll take 1,200 doses of a vaccine just to show you
I'm
that.
on my 50th COVID booster.
I'm on 50 COVID boosters. I don't think that's necessary. Yeah. But I also, think the other extreme to say I'm never taking a vaccine, probably also equally as radical. But there is, somewhere in the middle. And these are no longer like fringe questions. And so if you're a parent raising a child today, which, both Jeremiah and I have large families. We have lots of kids. And now I have lots of grandchildren. I'm older than him by a ways. But, if you're navigating your own health as a parent, but you also have a responsibility to your children as well. So when you're a parent, one of the things you need to think about is, how do I keep my children safe and healthy? And so we can all feel the ground has shifted a little bit over the last few years. Yeah. The conversation around vaccines have gone from the doctor's office to the dinner table. We're actually talking about it at home, and I get asked by my siblings and our siblings and friends and other people that I know. And certainly social media is just a total disaster of information. And I think that's the problem is, that where you get your information from will bias the way you think about it.
And it's crazy because 20 years ago, there were never these discussions. You'd go to your pediatrician's office, your pediatrician would say, hey, you're getting these vaccines on this schedule. And essentially everybody was like, great, sounds good.
Sounds good. This sounds great.
And this is interesting because right now in Utah, there's an active measles outbreak.
Yeah.
So, it's relevant, and it's becoming more and more relevant as these diseases that were really rare in large part due to vaccines are starting to come back.
To make a comeback, yeah. So at the end of the day, what we want to talk about today is, are they safe? Are vaccines safe? Is the schedule too fast? And that's, I think, what a lot of people are asking is, why do we have to give so many shots so quickly? And, the doctors, the physicians, people in healthcare are asking, how do I rebuild the trust that feels like it's been broken? Because no longer do people, when they go to the doctor and the doctor says, I'm going to give your kid 5 shots today, it's like, whoa, hold on. In the past, you say, okay, that's what you think is best. Let's do it. So, we and the policymakers, from the health policy and government side of things, I think we need to ask the question, have they focused too much on a compliance and not enough about education? So it's very clear there's a lot of confusion. And these are not uneducated, crazy people. I think these are thoughtful, educated people that are they feel overwhelmed by conflicting information, that they see stuff and say, well, wait a minute, is that true?
Yeah.
Or is this true? And so we're going to try to bring this down so it's not a polarized discussion. Both Jeremiah and I run clinical trials for a living. That's what we do. My job isn't to guess; it's to look at data and to spot safety signals and distinguish between something that might be related and something that might not be related. And when we run a clinical trial, we see all kinds of stuff. If you ask somebody, do you have a headache? If I ask you if you had a headache, you're not thinking about having a headache until I ask you that. But once I ask you that, you're like, well, maybe I do have a headache, you know? And so in a clinical trial, you get all kinds of people reporting stuff. And the question is that a coincidence or is it a cause? And those are things that are really, really important as you're developing a drug to say, is this drug or is this vaccine causing this? Or is it just a coincidence that's happening in the trial? So,
and to your point about the vaccine hesitancy, I mean, I even noticed that over my internal medicine residency. And so obviously there are, you tend to get vaccines early in childhood and then later on in life after the age of 65. And there's a handful of vaccines that are recommended now. And I got a lot of pushback, or more than I would expect. And I would say about half of the patients that I was their primary care physician, when I'd offer them a vaccine, they're like, I'm good this year, or I don't need it, or, oh, I don't feel like I want that. And so the talk has definitely shifted a lot to where there was much more trust in the, and I don't think it's necessarily unearned. Like I think that there may be some issues there, and there may be some things which we'll talk about, but I also, like, to your point, I don't know if enough of the education has got into it, because it's really easy to say something on social media without any fact check, without any kind of evidence to support it. And people like a sensational story. They like to say, oh, I took the COVID vaccine and then 48 hours later, like, my wife died. And it's like, oh, okay. So that's...
those types of things get a lot of attention, right? And I get asked all the time that, hey, my friend, they had a normal, healthy child and they got a vaccine, and then all of a sudden terrible things happen. So we're going to talk about that today. And, we've seen how the sausage is made. Like, we know how safety data is generated, how it's monitored, how it's questioned, how we act upon it. And we're going to walk you through that. So the goal today is not, I'm not trying to persuade you with some, try to take one side or the other. And I'm not here to tell you to trust the science. I hate it when people say that, because I'm a scientist and I generate scientific data all the time, and I don't trust anything, right? I mean, I'm constantly questioning and constantly trying to ask the next question. That's what science is all about. Is we test something, we come up with a result, and then we challenge it. We say, okay, if this is true, then we should see this. So, I want people to think about this and to really understand the science behind vaccines, and then make up your own mind about what you think and trust your own decision making. But to start with, I thought maybe what would be a good thing to do is to take a little look at history. I want to talk about autism, because that seems to be something I get asked a lot about. And then we'll talk about the vaccine schedule. Like, is it really, important, or is it a wise thing to be on the day of a child's birth to be giving them a bunch of vaccines? And then we can talk about the risks that doctors actually worry about, because with every medicine, including vaccines, there's risks. There's no medicine that has no risk. I mean, for heaven's sakes, if I drank enough of this water, I could cause problems, right? I mean, you could. In fact,
you can get water
toxicity.
Yeah, you can get water toxicity. It's like there's an old adage kind of in this industry where, like, the difference between a medicine and a poison is the dose.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And I think it's very true of anything that we put in our bodies, right? People are like, well, I don't know the ingredients that are in our vaccine. I don't know the ingredients in American cheese, but I still eat it.
Yeah.
And I for the most part I vaccinate my kids.
Yeah.
But I think a good thing that has come out of all these discussions is I think it, like you're saying, I want people to evaluate the pros and cons. I want them to think for themselves and to understand, well, what is the benefit? Should I be doing this?
And what are the risks?
Yeah, and what are the risks?
Yep. No, that's exactly right. All right. So to kind of just level set the history of how we got here in 2025, I think it's important to look back in the science of vaccines and where we came from. And there's this misconception, I think, that we've added more vaccines, we've added more biological burden to our immune system in the body. And, to be honest, I think the history of vaccines is actually the opposite. So the original vaccination in history was a sledgehammer. I mean, and today it's a precision missile or a scalpel. I mean, it's very, very different. So hundreds of years ago, even before we even knew what a virus was, I mean, before we even knew what a cell was, I mean, we didn't really know what our bodies were made of. People were experimenting with vaccines. So in China and in the Middle East, especially, if you survived a outbreak of a virus, and like for example, smallpox. Smallpox is a very contagious virus. It used to move through populations, and it was debilitating. It would make people very sick, and it could actually injure you, and some people would die from it. So what these healers would do, and hundreds of years ago, is they developed something that we called variolation, which was they would deliberately infect people with material. So they would take the pock, the pustule that the virus formed, and they would drain it and turn it into a powder and then administer that to people. And the reason why they did that is they realized that people that survived the virus wouldn't get the virus again. And so they thought, well, what if we could just give them a small amount of the virus? Maybe, they didn't know it was a virus. They just said a small amount of this disease. And they knew the pustules had whatever was transmitting that disease. They knew it was there. And so this was the first attempt at trying to hack our own immune systems to actually, vaccinate ourselves to protect ourselves from a future infection. And so that really was the beginnings of viruses, and we developed over time, and really not until like the 1800s, really that we started to better understand that there were these infectious microorganisms and viruses that were mediating these diseases. And so those of us that grew up in the in the late 1900s. We grew up with vaccines for polio, smallpox, measles, chickenpox, and these original vaccines that we came up with were active whole virus vaccines, and so they were either heat killed. So if you take a virus and you heat it up, it'll kill the virus, but you still get enough of the particles in the virus. So what a virus is made of is it has genetic material, so either RNA or DNA, and then around that genetic material, it has it's packaged. It has a package around it that's made up of lipids and proteins and sugars, and those are specific to the virus. That what the genetic material in a virus encodes all of those things, and so when a virus infects your cell, it puts its own genetic material into your cell. Some viruses actually integrate into our DNA. And some viruses just hijack our machinery and use our machinery to make proteins. But what the virus's whole goal is to replicate. It tries to replicate itself. And so it combines, it has several proteins, and several of those proteins are enzymes. So it has its own way of replicating and packaging and producing a viral particle. So what we did is we'd isolate these viruses, and we'd put them under heat. So we'd kill the virus so it's no longer not 100% infective.
Right.
And so we would use those whole virus vaccines. So then we used what's called attenuated viruses. So we could go in and we could weaken the virus so it wouldn't hurt you, but it was still a live viral vaccine. And so the vaccines I got when I was a kid, those are the vaccines that I got. Yeah. And they saved millions of people's lives. Yeah. But they were really complex because we were basically just attenuating what nature, so we were taking the edge off of the infectiousness and the ability of these viruses to replicate. But to be honest, I remember when I was a kid, you get a vaccine, you get sick. You get a fever, and then in the 1990s and the 2000s, we made a big leap. We stopped using the whole virus, and so very few of our vaccines now are whole viruses. They're usually either protein viruses, our protein vaccines, where we've isolated, like for hepatitis B is a good example. Human papillomavirus, HPV, is another example, where we've made a single protein from the outer shell of the virus, and we can actually vaccinate you with that protein because your body sees that protein. When you inject that protein in your body, your own immune system sees that, says that's not supposed to be here, and so you mount an immune response against that single protein. So the next time you see it, it's probably in a virus on the outer shell of the virus. So then you have protection against that whole virus. And so we realized that's actually a safer way of producing. And interestingly, we are producing immunity. And interestingly, we have really cool vaccines now, like the pneumococcal vaccine. It's actually a sugar.
Yeah, it's just like 23 sugars or something like that.
Yeah, so it's
that are seen on the back.
BioHive is a nonprofit building, branding, and bringing together Utah's fast-growing life science ecosystem. Get involved today. BioHive's Women in Technology and Science community hosts events for anyone and everyone wanting to support women in life science STEM. And BioHive's Health Tech Hub community hosts events for those operating at the intersection of health and technology. Register for events and see what's buzzing at biohive.com. The bacterial surface. Mm-hmm. So it's a bacterial vaccine, which is, most vaccines are actually for viruses, but we can vaccinate for bacteria. But it's actually sugar molecules from the bacterial surface that we vaccinate. So we've gotten pretty clever scientifically of how we can engineer these. So we went from big sledgehammers in the past where we were giving people active virus to heat-killed virus to attenuated virus to viral proteins to sugars, and then now just because of COVID, we have mRNA vaccines, and I mean it's funny because people's gut response to that mRNA. Everyone knows the words mRNA vaccine, but very few people know what that actually means.
Right.
But I think they are not seeing. I mean, people are, oh, that's dangerous. And let's be honest, it's new, and with any new thing, there's a lot of stuff we still don't know. Because we rushed those vaccines forward, and we clearly rushed them forward.
Yeah.
They had a very, we called it Operation Warp Speed, right?
Yeah.
We were trying to get a vaccine for COVID as fast as possible.
Yeah, it was crazy when you first. So we had like COVID probably early 2019, right? Is when it came out, and by end of the year 2020, people were getting the vaccine. So I was in the healthcare field at the time. Every hospital, probably universally, made their employees get vaccinated. And so like 9 or 10 months after the first diagnosis of this virus, now there are other coronaviruses, so it wasn't completely unique, but the COVID-19 virus was, that we had a vaccine that quickly
That's
thereafter.
Remarkable.
It's crazy.
Just from a scientific perspective, it just still blows my mind. We sequenced the virus in early 2020, and by late 2020, everybody had vaccines. So it's just crazy. So the takeaway, the reason why I ran through this history is, why does this matter? Well, people say today that kids get too many shots, and they're counting injections. They're counting the shots. What they should be thinking about is how many antigens your immune system's getting exposed to. And when I say antigens, those are the active ingredients that challenge our immune system. So they're the things that our immune system is looking for to say that's not supposed to be here, and let's get rid of that, and let's keep a memory of that. So we'll remember next time when we see that, we know that's a bad thing and we want to get rid of it. So when I was a kid, I received fewer shots than my children, and I certainly received fewer shots than my grandchildren. But for example, I was exposed to far more antigens.
Yeah, a live virus is going to give you so many more antigens,
thousands
and so much
of
more
antigens,
immune exposure than a single antigen presenting whatever it is.
Exactly.
That we get in the
when we think
vaccines
about
today.
when we think about it from the medical perspective, we're giving you more injections, but you're actually seeing fewer things that are stimulating your immune system than we did in the past. And so the question is, we have expanded protection, but we have a shrinking biological footprint. And so that's the context that we're dealing with today. And that's the balance. Is in the good old days, back when I was a kid, was it better to give live viruses where you got thousands of antigens exposure? If you're worried about biological burden, which I hear a lot, people are like, oh, it's too much. We're just giving too much to kids.
No, my wife asks me every time I go to the pediatrician's office, she's like, they're getting 5 shots. Is that too many? Should we spread them out? Should we do this? And but
the reality was, in the old days, even though I got 3 shots, I got thousands of antigens,
Right.
and today they're getting 3 antigens, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's very, very different. And so the big question is, how do we know these things are safe, right? And do we know they're safe? And so there's a belief that the FDA, which is Food and Drug Administration in the United States, they're the approval regulatory agency that says this. In fact, their mandate is to say this drug or this vaccine or this therapeutic medical device, they regulate all that stuff, and food as well, is safe and effective. Those are the 2 things they worry about: is does it do what the manufacturer says it does, and is it safe for people? So there's a belief that once something says, the FDA deems this is safe, then the testing stops. But in reality, that's actually when it really begins, because when we run clinical trials, we may test tens of thousands of people on the upside, and on the small side, hundreds of people. Like, a drug can be approved with just hundreds of people being exposed to it. Vaccine is tens of thousands of people being exposed to it. But you think about tens of thousands to millions of people, and in COVID's case, billions of people. There's a big jump that happens between that. And so the real safety engine is what we call post-market surveillance, and that runs forever. That never stops. So once a vaccine is approved, there is a constant monitoring, looking for signals to say, is this thing really safe? It's been deemed safe and effective in a clinical trial setting, but extrapolating from 10,000 people to 10 million people, you're going to see some changes. So here's the problem, and this is the hardest part of safety science, is every single day bad things happen to people. Right. You worked in a hospital, and there was a revolving door of bad stuff going on.
I read a report that was saying, I think it's like a 1 in 10,000, or it's probably higher than that, but of just spontaneously dying. Yeah. Like, people, it happens all the time. Yeah. We don't have a cause. We don't have a reason. Yeah. And it happens. And when you expand, you go from 10,000 people to 10 million people, then the likelihood of that occurring is going to be significantly higher.
So you did your training at Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona, and Scottsdale is part of the Phoenix metropolitan area. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of people, millions of people in that area. And every day, I mean, you did stints in the emergency department. Mm-hmm. There every day, continuous flow of people coming in with heart attacks, strokes, miscarriages, seizures, you name it. There's a long list of things that can happen. And some of those people had just gotten a vaccine, right? And so the question is, so if you vaccinate 10 million people on Monday, and then Tuesday bad things happen, is it because of the vaccine, or is it just part of the bad things happen just randomly? And so it's hard, right? Yeah. That's really, really hard. And we look at that data all the time. We're running clinical trials, and it's like this patient took our drug and then had a seizure. Yeah. Did that drug cause the seizure, or did they have a seizure just because one in whatever chance of having a seizure, it just happened? And so how do we tell the difference between coincidence and a real safety signal? Yeah. And the answer is, the only way that we can do it is by looking at lots and lots of data, because the one anecdotal thing where my aunt got vaccinated and she had a heart attack and dropped dead just like that, it had to be the vaccine. If you just have that one data point, you can't conclude. I mean, I know why people look at that and say that's a problem. I mean, I got COVID, and all of a sudden I got a fever, and then I had some cardiac problem or something. I can understand that, right? Because that's an N of 1, and that's something you experience yourself. And it is really, it's impossible for us to tell, was it with one person, right?
Yeah, they always say one person is a tragedy, 10,000 is a statistic.
That's right.
And I think that's what happens, is because you do get this sensational story. You'll you see it on the news. It'll make the rounds on social media. It's all of these things. And it was like, they were perfectly healthy. They got the vaccine, and then they developed inflammation of the heart, or their pancreas became inflamed, or their liver. And it's like, I'm sure that happened, but it's so hard to say if that's the vaccine.
What's the coincidence and what's the cause? And we just don't know. So we do have systems to actually monitor this, and you're probably not aware of this, but physicians are actually under obligation that they, if they see things, they have to report them. And Jeremiah can tell you there's a lot of charting that goes on, a lot of recording that goes on. When you go to a doctor visit, as much time as you spend with the nurses and doctors, they spend more time recording what they learned, on the back end that you don't see. And so if there is a chance of something, there's this, these early warning systems. So we have a bunch of different systems that are there for early warning, for verifying and for reviewing data that's coming in. And so there's actual monitoring systems that exist. And this is why we have a Center for Disease Control. This is why we have public health systems. Every state has public health systems. In fact, some cities even have their own public health systems where they monitor electronic health records. Everything's electronic nowadays in the United States, that they're no longer paper records. You enter them, and there's searches going on to look for certain cues. And so the system knows, hey, this person just had a vaccine, and now they had a fever, they had a seizure, they had something that happened. And so they ask the question, are seizures happening more often in vaccinated kids compared to unvaccinated kids? We can actually in real time start answering those questions. And then once we get to the level of, hey, it looks like there's something, there's a trend and there's something happening here, then there's an expert review that happens. And this is, disease experts, infectious disease doctors, pathologists, medical professionals. They convene, and this is where the Center for Disease Control, this is the whole point of the CDC, is that they monitor this data. When they start to see things popping up, they get a panel of experts together and say, should we be worried about this? And, I think what's happened, unfortunately, is COVID kind of broke this system a little bit because there was so much concern from the public health side that we were going to see millions and millions and millions of people die.
I remember they were saying 10% mortality rates early on.
Early on. It's like 1 in 10 people are going to die. I mean, can you imagine if that actually happened? That would have been, and so in the abundance of caution, I think we stepped over the line, and we started to just say, it's safe, it's effective, everyone get vaccinated, don't worry about it. And it honestly, it really eroded public trust because people looked at it. Remember the J&J vaccine? So when it first started, there were 3 vaccines that kind of came out. So Pfizer and BioNTech, Moderna, and J&J. So those were the 3 COVID vaccines that originally came out. There are more now, but those were the 3 early ones. The 2, Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna were mRNA-based vaccines, brand new technology, never been tried before. And J&J was a different type of vaccine. It was more of a traditional type of vaccine. What was interesting is, the J&J vaccine quickly went away. And I think most people don't know why it went away. But the reason why it went away is it was linked to a rare specific clotting disorder. And that was picked up in this monitoring. So it was approved quickly. And then this monitoring system found that about 1 in a million, which is not very much, but still it's enough, right? So if there's 350 million people in the United States, 350 people, are going to get this rare clotting disorder. But that's enough to create, when you have another alternative that doesn't have that risk associated with it, you can say, hey, maybe it's not a good idea to take that vaccine, and maybe you should focus on another one.
Think about how remarkable that is. Because it was a matter of months that we had this, we saw it in the larger population. Because again, when you cover a clinical trial, you're not going... When you read, it's funny, if you read the reports from clinical trials and drug safety, they report everything that occurred, like absolutely everything. They'll even if it's not drug related, like somebody got struck by lightning in one that I read, and they have to put that in there. And they're like, I don't know, it's probably not, you're not going to be more likely to get struck by lightning if you're taking the drug. But I always think about it when we hear about E. coli outbreaks or things like that. Like the public health system is so good at picking up, because it's tens of people. It'll be like 6 people that got E. coli from lettuce, and it's off the shelves immediately. And
people don't realize when you see that on the news and say, hey, there's an E. coli detected in lettuce, we're recalling all this. It's literally just a handful of people. They're trying to get ahead of any potential problem. But think about that. This system detected a risk that's almost the same risk of getting struck by lightning. I mean, that's and it led to pausing the rollout investigating, updating the guidance, updating the directions to physicians. And that's not a failure. That's actually the strength, showing what we can actually do. So I don't want to be, seen as being an advocate for any of this stuff, but I'm just telling you what the data tell us is this monitoring system is actually pretty good. Like ability to sort through data and look at it, and it's getting better all the time. So,
and I think AI is going to
make it even better
because it doesn't get tired of looking at data.
Exactly.
And graphs,
and when looking at real people can only look at things for so long. All right, so one of the big elephants in the room is, all right, so we have a safety monitoring system. We just talked about the history of vaccines and how we monitor safety. So big question people ask is, do vaccines increase risk for autism? And I think the reason why people are asking this is that when I was a kid, I don't remember knowing. I mean, there were severely autistic people who were nonverbal and we knew those people existed, but there wasn't this, that we talk about a spectrum on autism disorder now. I mean, we had weird people running around.
That's just my weird uncle.
Yeah,
that's like he loves trains.
I mean, that's how we thought about him, but we didn't diagnose that. And so today it's like, why are there so many more autistic people today? And when I was young, I didn't even know what autism was. I didn't even know that word.
Right.
And so, parents are asking, hey, when you have a happy, verbal 15-month-old and you just gave them a round of shots and 2 months later they stop making eye contact, they stop using words, it's human nature to say there's a connection between those two things, right? And
you want to find a reason why that happened.
I mean, we as humans, we always we just, for whatever reason, it's ingrained in us to say, why did this happen, right? That we can't just accept random chance. I mean, whatever it is, we have to have a cause associated with everything that happens. And so as a parent and as a grandparent, I am so sympathetic to people that are in that situation. And I completely understand that connecting those things. But as a scientist, I really think, we got to be careful about how we look at data. And so there is this problem of whether this is a direct effect and there's an illusion between there's a direct connection between those things, or whether it's just the timing of what happens. And so let's talk about that for a minute. So this hypothesis has been around for a while. Yeah. We've been exploring this for quite a while. There are actually millions of data points that have been looked at, and we looked at there are studies published in the United States, in Denmark, in Japan, in Australia, and all over
across
the
globe.
Looking at, is there a connection between autism and vaccines? We've looked at kids that got the MMR vaccine. We've looked at kids that didn't get the MMR vaccine. We looked at kids that got this mercury stabilizer, that now we've gotten out of the vaccines, but at some point in time we had it in there, and then kids that didn't get that. And is there a difference in autism rates in these different populations? We've looked at siblings of autistic children to see whether they were more vulnerable. And the result is it does not look like there is not an overriding signal. So if you look at the totality of all of the data, there may be individual reports that say, hey, there might be a connection here. But if you look at all of the data put together, it doesn't seem that there is an epidemiological connection between vaccines and the risk of autism. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't, it's not definitive by any means. This is just, because what we're doing, it's really hard to actually test this experimentally. We're actually just retrospectively looking. Yeah. Like we're not conducting a prospective study and say, let's see if we can make people autistic, right? By giving, that's not being, we're just looking back and saying, okay, here's a group of people that got this vaccine and here's a group of people that didn't. What's the rate of autism in these different populations? What if you could get rewarded just for being healthier? Meet Galvin, the company using the latest blockchain technology to reward you for taking care of yourself. They help with your mind, body, and soul like a personalized health assistant to track your progress and help you feel better. Galvin's G Plus app rewards you for exercise and assesses your mental health in under a minute using AI and over 2,500 voice biomarkers. If you're feeling off, G Plus gives you personalized power-ups, science-backed techniques to help you feel better fast. And here's the best part. When you prioritize your wellness, you earn crypto. Ready to level up your health? Use promo code GOODMED20 at checkout for 20% off. Download G Plus today at the Apple app or Google Play Store and start your wellness journey with Galvin.
And these studies are hard because, like, to your point, you're like, oh, my child was normal up until this point. And so you're going to think a lot harder than somebody who doesn't have that exposure.
Absolutely.
Or who doesn't have those issues. So the ideal trial, and we talk about this, everything has some subject to bias. But like doing a placebo controlled, meaning you give them something that isn't the drug versus is the drug, and then comparing what happens, that's the gold standard, right? That's what everybody wants to do. But we're not going to do that in this situation because it's not worth the risk. It's not worth it there. And so we look back, but people have imperfect memories. I mean, I can't tell you what I ate last week. I like those kind of things. But you will remember a traumatic event. You'll remember something that's big, and you'll try and find an exposure or some kind of risk because it's human nature to want to find a cause for this reason.
Absolutely.
And so that's why this has persisted. I mean, I think the original basis was on bad science. But it's persisted because, like you said, well, we have more autism diagnoses now. And it's like, well, what is it? Is it the vaccine? Is it not? We're not saying it isn't, but it's really, really hard. Humans are horrible test subjects. You can't keep them in a clean room like a mouse. You can't control their diet and their patterns and their exercise and their sleep. And so you just kind of go with what the data you have. And like you said, the data suggests that there isn't at least that we can find a definitive link between the two.
And here's the biggest challenge is, what is autism? It is not one thing, right? And that's why people talk about the spectrum. I can't even tell you what autism is. Like it's a general term that applies to a bunch of neurological disorders. And what we do know, so why are rates going up? Well, one, we're getting better at diagnosing autism, especially in higher functioning individuals, even in adults. Adults can be diagnosed, which is kind of interesting. Girls present differently than boys. And so there's been a challenge for a long time. I think the current thinking, and let me just be clear scientifically, we have no idea
it's
right
messy.
now.
We don't know.
It's super, super messy.
There's no biology that we can point to. There's no specific genes. So we're both cancer biologists. That's our background, our training. You can point to specific genes that drive a cancer. You can point to specific risk factors. Smoking causes lung cancer. We know that. We have no idea what causes autism. We have no idea what genes are triggered. We have no idea what changes are, but we know, we see the effects of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it appears that there is a genetic component to autism, and that seems to be the case. It does seem to have, at least for certain forms of autism, there seems to be, it runs in families, but it's very complex. It's not a single gene. It's probably multiple genes. And we're really bad at studying, multi-genetic variants. It's really hard because it's very complicated. But what we do know is there are studies that have been done that show that we can see differences using imaging in utero, so during pregnancy, in the second trimester of pregnancy, long before the child ever sees his first vaccine, that there's brain structures that look different on imaging. Now, is that proof of anything? It's not, but it starts to give us hints. There's some challenges. So once a child's born, the neurodevelopment in the brain happens very, very quickly. I mean, we've all experienced it. We've all seen children. It's amazing how fast children develop. They go from being completely dependent upon their parents for everything, couldn't survive on their own. If you left them there, they would die, to just in a few months, at least being able to be mobile, but being verbal, being able to communicate, being able to pick up on cues, whether they're verbal or not, being able to communicate. But all of this development happens in the first 12 to 18 months of life. There's a lot of development that happens. And this just so happens to be when we're giving them a bunch of vaccines. And so when we separate the timing, in the treatment, when you look at that together, it's like, well, hey, we're giving a bunch of shots, and there's the stuff that's happening, that's the problem. So once again, this goes back to, are we giving them too many shots, and is the schedule too many too soon? And I think, to be honest, so I think I've seen, but I think if you surveyed people, I think most people feel like it feels like it's too much.
Yeah.
And it's just because I think there has been a ramp up in the number of injections, but as we mentioned, it's just different. Now here's why. So people ask, well, why? Why is it on the day of a child's birth you're giving them a vaccine for hepatitis B, which is largely a sexually transmitted disease, which is not at endemic or pandemic scale in the United States? Why does that child need that vaccine? Well, the other side of things is a brand new born baby is the most vulnerable situation in terms, if they get infected with almost any virus, almost any virus can kill them. Yeah. Pertussis, whooping cough. Yeah. A newborn child, deadly. Kills a newborn child. Teenager, fine. Yeah. Teenager, it's just, I got sick, I'm fine. So that is why, because people are like, why don't we wait until they're a teenager? Well, if we wait until a teenager, they might not need that vaccine, right? For that particular, because why we're vaccinating people is not just to protect the one individual, we're also trying to protect the community as well. And that's another thing that's hard for people to wrap their head around is vaccines are a social contract. It's not just to protect you and your children, to protect everybody, because they are infectious diseases that we spread to each other.
Measles is so when they talk about viruses, measles is considered the perfect virus.
It's a great virus. Yeah.
It's one person can infect like so many people.
Thousands of people, yeah.
Within a matter. You don't even have to be close to them. Right. I mean, and so, but everybody, if you get this mindset of, well, I'm not going to get vaccinated because everybody else is. Yeah. There are certain people that can't get vaccinated. Yep. They have immune conditions. Yep. They won't respond. It's dangerous for them. And so there is some safety in the fact that other people are vaccinated. But as you get more and more unvaccinated people, then that starts to deteriorate and go away. And the other thing that I think people think about is vaccines aren't perfect, right? They're not perfect. And so MMR is a really good vaccine. I think it does a really good job. It's not perfect. Yeah. And so you can get vaccinated and still get measles. Yeah. But that's not a reason to throw it out completely and say, well, it doesn't work or it didn't work for me. Yeah, no.
And so we're trying to optimize this and say, when are you most vulnerable? When do the protections, because during pregnancy, the baby's protected from these infections by the mother. So the mother's actually actively providing protection. And then when can we optimize the immune response? Because as the immune system is being trained and developed, there's some advantage to actually exposing to antigens right there. So anyway, at the end of the day, for us, I don't think parents should worry about overwhelming the immune system. Having a kid crawling around and putting stuff in its mouth, they're getting exposed to far more antigens than
a single infection that your 18-month-old gets a cold exposes you to far more antigens than a series of vaccines ever would.
And you said your wife asked the question, and I think this happens a lot, that people say, well, can't we just space them out? It feels like it's too. This is not random that we came up with this schedule. We're trying to optimize. The reason why we give boosters is to boost the immune response. And if you wait too long, you kind of lose that boost. And so we've done a lot of experimentation to try to figure out, this is the right time and the right schedule to give people. So
the best way to gain immunity to an illness is by getting that illness.
That's right. Yeah.
And so when we are giving parts of it or incomplete, the immune system response is never going to be as good because you're not exposed to all the things that come with the virus, the responses that occur. However, if you can prevent somebody from getting sick but still provide pretty good coverage and safety, then and I guess at the end of the day, what I always talk to patients about is, okay, look at the risks for you. Yeah. Is the risk of the vaccine greater than the risk of getting the disease? Yeah. If that's the case, then I wouldn't get vaccinated.
Yeah, and that's a good segue. What is the real risk? What do we know? So the real risks are anaphylaxis. Mm-hmm. That's a real risk. So you would know that as an allergic response, and you can die from it, right? So So if I give somebody peanuts that's allergic to peanuts, they can die from a peanut. If I give somebody penicillin that's allergic to penicillin, they can die from that. So you can be allergic to an ingredient in the vaccine. There's a lot of stuff in those vaccines, ingredients.
If you remember in COVID, I went through a drive-through vaccine and I had to sit in my car for 15 or 30 minutes.
And people are like, why?
Yeah.
That's why, right?
It was to monitor for anaphylaxis to make sure you didn't die
Yeah.
immediately after getting it.
And we have to immediately intervene if you have an anaphylactic response, or you could die.
Yeah.
So that is a risk. That is a real risk. And we try to mitigate that risk by doing just that. We typically don't send you home immediately after getting a vaccine because it might be a 1 in a million chance, but you might be that 1 in a million person. The other more common one that people don't think about, especially for kids, is 1 in 3,000 children after getting a high fever will have a seizure. Febrile seizures are 1 in 3,000. That's not that much. I mean, that's not
one of my 5 kids had a febrile seizure.
Yeah, it happens, right? And they're terrifying to watch as a parent. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, the fire department came because I was at medical school at the time. And my wife called 911 and she's like, the fire department almost kicked in the door. Yeah. They're bringing people in. Yeah. Your daughter's my daughter was non-responsive for a little bit and came back, and it's terrifying.
It's terrifying. And it's 1 in 3,000 chance. So that's not nothing, right? I mean, that's fairly common. They're almost always benign. And they
get one.
They
don't count it toward your
They really don't leave lasting damage most of the time. It happens most commonly with MMR vaccines. The MMR, because it's a triple antigen vaccine, so your measles, mumps, rubella, that there's a fever associated with that vaccine a lot of times. That fever is caused by your immune system. Most people don't know that as well. It's like, oh, the virus caused the fever. The virus didn't cause the fever. Your immune system caused the fever.
You want an immune response with a vaccine. Yeah. Like if you have zero immune response, then a vaccine's worthless.
It didn't work. Right, exactly.
And so the fact that you feel kind of lousy afterward, your kids maybe have a sore arm, they get a fever, that's kind of actually a sign that the vaccine is doing its thing and is working.
So if it has no side effects, it's probably not a good vaccine. So then the question is, well, what about a 1 in 10 million side effect? Who knows, right? I mean, those are so hard to pick up. They may exist. Yeah. But it's one of those things that as a society, we have every time we come up with a new treatment or new vaccine or new therapy, there are some people that are going to be harmed by that more than they're helped by it. And it's a weird social contract that we just have to say, you know what? There's more benefit than there is risk. If you're the one person that is affected by the risk, it's not good for you. But as a society, as a culture, as a country, it's one of those things that's like, you know what? It's better for us to vaccinate the whole population and take a few hits than it is to take the bigger hits by letting something spread through the population. And that's a hard thing when you're the one. Yeah. It's a hard thing to wrap your head around, but unfortunately, that's the situation that we face.
Most people aren't going to die from measles, but it's a lot higher risk of dying from measles than it is from getting the MMR vaccine.
That's right, exactly. And so that's the balance. So, are there long-term consequences? Who knows, right? Yeah. I mean, it's really, really hard to study those things. So at the end of the day, I think that we do the best that we can. I think when you look at all the data that exists, I don't think that there's a lot of long-term risk that we know about. Now, could we be missing things? Sure.
But I don't think we've focused enough on some of the potential benefits. Polio, we eradicated terrible diseases, smallpox, polio. I mean, I think it still exists in small pockets in places, but that's kind of a public health win that we got rid of some highly contagious infectious diseases with terrible potential side effects and pretty high mortality.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, hopefully this conversation was beneficial. So to the parents that are out there, it's your job to protect your child, and it's your job to ask questions. And asking questions doesn't make you anti-science. It doesn't make you an anti-vaxxer. It makes you a responsible person and a responsible parent. But be careful where you get your answers from. So Google and search engines that are out there, they're designed to feed your anxiety, right? Like, I mean, that's they want you
to pay attention.
They want you to get in this loop and to stay on and that's what they get paid for. That's how they make money. And so algorithms will feed your anxiety. If you say, I'm anxious about giving my kids the vaccine, what things should I be worried about? You're going to get all kinds of craziness and if you get caught up in that, you could think there's lots of evidence there, but just be careful where you get your information from and try, ask medical professionals. If you ask your pediatrician specific questions, ask him, what's the most common thing that you see when you get this injection to kids? What can I expect? What happens if I don't vaccinate and my kid actually gets this disease? Is it worse? I mean, ask those questions.
Yeah. No, I think
the doctor will ask.
It's a perfectly
reasonable thing to ask.
I'll give the COVID vaccine as an example of this. So under the age of 18, there were essentially 0 COVID deaths when it first came out.
Yep.
I mean, unless you had severe immune deficiency or something else. And so the question is, okay, should I vaccinate my child against COVID? I didn't get my kids vaccinated against COVID. I got the vaccine. I had my wife get the vaccine, but I said, well, the risk is really low with the kids. It's a very mild disease in them.
Right.
It's no different than a cold. And I get the risk if other people are there, but you keep them home. Everybody was staying home. You do those things. So again, it's a risk-benefit analysis that you look for in your personal, like what your family believes, what you go there, and you kind of take it from there.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I think for everybody, from what we know, and once again, the caveat is we could learn something tomorrow that would change right. our ways of thinking about things. But I think we feel pretty confident vaccines are safer and more precise than they ever have been. The schedule that is recommended is there to protect children when they're most vulnerable. Autism is an extremely complex genetic condition and likely not a vaccine injury. Now, could vaccines contribute? Maybe. I mean, maybe. And we could talk more about that later. But anxiety is real. I think it's important that if you're worried about stuff, try to figure it out. As somebody who looks at data for a living, I've looked at the childhood schedule and I've looked at the safety profiles, and based on the weight of that evidence, I vaccinated my own children. My daughter came and said, I don't want to vaccinate my grandchildren. And, I can lay out to her and say, here's the data. I mean, it's your choice if you feel, but don't just do it out of some blind faith of some, whatever.
Yeah. TikTok you saw.
TikTok that you saw and say, oh yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. If you have questions, ask your doctor. If you want to see studies, they exist and go to the primary sources. It's hard to read through them, but there are ways with AI now. You can download a scientific paper, put it into one of these AI, ChatGPT, Gemini,
summarize
whatever.
This for somebody who has a high school education.
Yeah, they'll do it for you, and then you can get the direct scientific data. So I guess that's all for today. I know hopefully we probably didn't answer everybody's questions, but it's something that I can completely understand the concern. And I can share your concern, but I think the overall totality of the data suggests, the vaccines are safe and effective in large part.
Yep, I agree.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for joining the Good Medicine Podcast. We'll be back next week with some hopefully exciting information and material for you. Thank you very much. That's it for today's episode of Good Medicine. Thanks for joining us as we explore the science and stories behind health, medicine, and innovation. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's a great zero-cost way to support us. In addition, please click, follow, and leave a review for the podcast on Apple and Spotify. If you have questions or comments for me, please put them in the comments section on YouTube or reach out on all social media platforms at Good Medicine. Links are in the description. The best way to support the podcast is to check out the sponsors of the show. You can do this by looking at the links in the show notes. That's it for today. I'm Dr. David Beers, and we'll see you next time.